Ma'am. Good evening. Welcome to your city council meeting. Thanks for coming. I will hereby call to order the Hood River City Council meeting for February 13th, 2023. I believe we have Councilor Rivera on Zoom. Is this correct? Great. Are both on digital? Heather and Christy, welcome. If you could let me know if Gladys arrives, that'd be helpful. Thanks. The very first thing is we remember to turn off our cell phones. The very next thing is we acknowledge that for a long time before our people came to these lands, there were people here already. And what has happened is not my fault or your fault, but is quite a damn thing that has happened. So let's just at least keep that in mind. And let's pledge allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm just grateful my chair is not near the edge, so it's not hard.
You gotta save her.
Exactly. I'm glad you're okay. That's all that matters. Good, good. All the feet intact. Great. Okay, so now I will formally recess this meeting, call a recess, because we're going to start the Urban Renewal meeting. Now, the chair of the Urban Renewal Committee is Kate McBride. She was the mayor when she was the chair, so she's no longer on council, so she's no longer, but I have decided, and feel free to quibble, that it's not a mayor thing, it's a person thing. So I think the acting chair, the current chair of the Urban Renewal Agency is Vice Chair Zen Miller. So I'm going to hand over the chair of this meeting to Vice Chair Zen Miller.
Hurrah. Okay, and on the packet for the Urban Renewal District, and hi Christy and hi Heather. The first item of business is selection of chair and vice chair. So I am happy, I guess, or I'm willing to play this role, but I think that let's open it up for discussion and see if anyone would really relish being chair of Urban Renewal or vice chair of Urban Renewal Agency. Please say such a thing, and then the nomination will come out of that. So, any thoughts, Grant?
I would love to nominate Mark first.
Let's see if anyone has thoughts pre-nomination. Doug, any thoughts?
None.
Tim?
Fine with Mark.
Christy?
I would volunteer Mark as he's the long-standing member.
Man, this is not. If I was a betting person, I
and then
Heather?
I would also suggest for vice chair to either be Megan or Tim, again, for the continuity of longest standing members on the board.
That I think that makes sense too. Do one of I'm just discussing, and then we'll just do one motion. I think is there for vice chair A, willingness, and B, thoughts from the herd?
We could arm wrestle for it.
That at least would be entertaining. That's good. Any suggestions? Based on seniority, maybe Megan then? I no idea. Christy, how's that work?
I would be great if Megan were the vice chair. She'll do a great job.
We have a Gladys. That's nice. Good to see you. Mountain Goat Gladys. That's good. I don't know. What do you think?
I nominate Mark for chair and Megan for vice chair.
Second. We have a motion from Paul and a second. Do we have? Let's let all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, there we have it. Mark and Megan are the chair and vice chair of of the Urban Renewal Agency for the next wee bit. Okay, Abigail, any additions to the agenda?
No, we have nothing new.
Okay, we have a few different things to go through. The first one is consent agenda. It's in the packet for 2 different meetings, way back in November and December. Do we have a motion or discussions on the minutes?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of approving the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, motion passed. We have 2 presentations and then another sort of presentation in the regular business. The Hood River Waterfront Urban Renewal Plan Phase 2 by Kevin. If you could come up and tell us what you guys are thinking, that would be great.
Got a presentation.
And if you push one of those white buttons on that spaceship thing, you'll be raring to go.
And Chair Zandler, if I could just give a couple opening remarks.
Please.
Before Mr.
please,
Greenwood
please.
starts.
Yeah.
I just want to remind you that the port came to you last summer and asked for kind of your blessing to do a study. They actually funded the study themselves. And then today, as a result, bringing that back. I asked Kevin to bring this to the Urban Renewal Agency because it's an urban renewal topic, and I also wanted that courtesy to the port commissioners who are members of this board. However, tonight's not a decision-making night. The decision as to for their request is actually a council decision. So I'll put that on the agenda for February 27th for the regular council meeting, assuming that there's kind of clear direction that you want to do that. So that's all I wanted to say, and we'll turn it back to Mr. Greenwood.
As soon as I can get this figured out here. Oh, that was it, huh? There we go. Okay, great. So my name is Kevin Greenwood. I'm the executive director at the Port of Hood River. I did present to the advisory group about a month ago to talk a little bit about the concept of closing down the waterfront urban renewal district and starting a smaller urban renewal district to take into account the vacant land along the waterfront. The port is requesting that the city consider assisting with the development of Lot 1 and associated public amenities through the use of urban renewal financing. As you know, the port commissioned a report to look at different options, and it's great to have Elaine here to help with that. She did that presentation last time at the advisory group, and the port entirely understands that the city council and the urban renewal district want to focus on housing, and we're completely behind that because the port firsthand is having issues trying to hire good people for those important services down along the waterfront and at the airport. So we understand that. So we totally are in favor of the need to close down the waterfront urban renewal district and allow those increased taxes to go back onto the rolls and to get behind the other priorities of the city. So the Lot 1 infrastructure continues to be a priority for the port and many in the city. And not only are there just pure infrastructure needs, there's also waterfront amenity needs as well. So when we're talking about Lot 1, we're also talking about other vacant land that at this point have a frozen base. So as development occurs, 100% of that new development could be put into a very small single lot micro urban renewal agency to continue to support the partnership between the port and the city as a development occurs along the waterfront. So the port has done preliminary engineering, has done some conceptual planning over the last couple of years, and to put in Anchorway and the First Street realignment is, as you can see there, it's over $4 million. And we did get $1 million worth of grants and appropriations through Senator Thompson, I believe 2 sessions ago. So we are looking for a little bit of assistance through the tax increment to help offset these costs. One of the priorities for the port now with the new bridge authority coming up and the port eventually getting off of tolls, we really see that this additional TI coming in will just help the port continue to diversify and look for ways to develop things along the waterfront that aren't dependent on tolls. And so we do think that this is one way to help offset some of those costs so that we can take these funds and reinvest them in other economic development opportunities, not from tolls, but from actual activities that the port will be doing. So some of this is from a Walker Macy study from a few years ago. And it's a little bit hard to see. I don't know if I can bring a pointer up here to kind of look around, but this is the reorganization of First Street. As you can see, it comes out to the left a little bit to the west and allows for the opportunity for some small development pads. I believe there's about 7,000 square feet of available commercial space along here. This could actually be used for small flotation rentals, ice cream shops, real small little retail outlets that could support Nichols Basin and the waterfront. Anchor Way is a requirement by ODOT. And so this is actually a primary part of the construction. I just want to make note that there's this pedestrian route, which is, I think, was referred to as the swerve. This project is not identifying or considering the construction of the swerve. We're really focused more on the Anchor Way improvement and the First Street improvement along Nichols Basin. So the types of public projects that we would be looking to implement with the help of the city would be everything from developing a spot for boat storage, adding a plaza, Riverside Plaza, oversights, overpasses, places for people to kind of be on a promontory and look out over the Nichols Basin, and providing an opportunity for easier access for kayakers and canoers, and just trying to put a little bit of a finish touch between the new First Street and Nichols Basin to just bring a little more recreational amenities to that part of the waterfront. And I think at this point, we're starting to get into some of the technical issues, so I'll hand this over to Elaine.
Good evening, I'm Elaine Howard. I've been working on this project with Tiberius Solutions, who does all of our financial forecasting. I also do a lot of work for the city, so you'll be seeing me at a couple of these presentations tonight. So when we came back to you earlier, we were talking about doing a feasibility study and looking at the options of what could be done to assist the port on the development of Lot 1. And at that point, we talked about looking at different scenarios and getting your interest in that. And the feedback that we got was that if the port wanted to fund that and put together some scenarios and bring it back, that you are willing to listen to what those scenarios might be. When we did the analysis, as we were working it through, we thought really only 2 options made sense. The first option was to expand the existing urban renewal area by increasing its maximum indebtedness. And that would allow you to gain the amount of money that the port is looking for, a little under $2 million in just 2 years. However, with the city's desire to do the west side urban renewal area, that ties up that acreage, and that really wasn't in alignment with what the city wanted to do policy-wide. So when we talked with the port about what other option we should look at to potentially make something work in partnership with the port and the city, the one that made the most sense was creating a very limited urban renewal district that at that point, when we did the feasibility study, just consisted of lot 1. So those are called single property urban renewal districts. This one would start out with a 0 frozen base, 0 value, because the port owns that property and there's nothing developed on it. So any new development that occurred on that property would be all creating that tax increment. And that tax increment then can be used to pay for portions of those public improvements that the port needs to be able to develop that property. So those public improvements aren't identified, but it could be the streets and the utilities that go with it. It could be those public amenity package there along Nichols Basin. So in knowing those projects, those haven't really been identified. The reason that we started this initially was if the thought was you're going to extend your existing district, that district is meeting its maximum, reaching its maximum indebtedness this year. And a new district or an expansion of that would have to happen before it met its maximum indebtedness. So at that point, we were on a pretty tight timeline to try to get you that information so that you could make some kind of decision. In talking with the port as we did the analysis, we all decided that the port did not want to come to you and request that you expand or keep the existing waterfront district, acknowledging that you have other plans for that acreage and that you would like to close that district down. So what the port is wanting to do is see if you have an interest in doing a single property or maybe a single property plus one urban renewal district to help fund those public infrastructure projects in the area. When we looked at that just for lot 1 and the potential development, the ability to gain about that $2 million would take 10 years of tax increment revenue collections. The port would have to upfront some of those costs and then be repaid once the tax increment comes online. And we have developed other urban renewal plans that have that concept. As we put that feasibility study together and we're preparing for this presentation, Kevin got back to me and said, well, what if we added lot 900 to that, which is a lot directly to the south of lot 1, on which there may be a hotel. And what would that do to the potential scenario? So just in terms of, I think we're in the brainstorming phase right now. In terms of looking at that, it would reduce potentially the time frame for an urban renewal area from 10 years to 6 years. So take off 4 years of that time frame. So we all know that urban renewal typically lasts 25 years or so. So what the port is asking you to consider is a very limited acreage, 10 to 15 acres, and a very limited time frame for a limited amount of money to fund projects that could be negotiated with the city, between the city and the port, if you were interested in proceeding. So that's what their request is that you consider that. And I'd be happy to go through any of the details on any of that, but the key points are the boundary could be either lot 1 or lot 1 plus lot 900. If it was lot 1, it would be about a 10-year tax increment collection. If it was lot 1 plus lot 900, it'd be about a 6 years of tax increment collection. That would be about $2 million. And that $2 million could fund any of those types of projects that Kevin identified, the streets, the utilities, the public amenities.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Kevin. I would say the next step is question. Mark clicked first.
Can I didn't hear that.
Thank you very much. That was great. So questions for these guys? Hang out, but let's start with the folks on Zoom. So Christy, any questions? You might have heard this stuff before.
I think I've heard this a lot, so yeah, I'm good.
Heather?
No questions for me.
Gladys?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. Let's just go around desk here. Doug, any questions for them?
No questions for me.
Tim?
So of the projects, there was kind of like this thought that we could potentially negotiate the types of projects, or if we were to move forward with this, what would the port's priority be for the project?
Well, I think that the main thing is all. Sure. Let's see here. Council bus. So I would say that, infrastructure is always the important one. So obviously water, sewer, the streets are a priority, but we also are responsible for managing the waterfront access areas. And so we're also expecting from our marina and waterfront committees that there be some investment in those areas as well.
So how would you envision the negotiation about the types of projects to go? How would that go?
Well, I would imagine that, the port and the city would maybe schedule a few meetings, talk about priorities and find out what is important for the city along the waterfront and go through a couple of feedback sessions with our full boards and our managers and just work through that until we can get agreement and codify it in a document.
So for these types of projects, like to develop like lot 1, and apparently there's something planned for lot 900 already.
Well, there is for lot 900, there is an effort to try to get a hotel underway, but nothing has been finalized in that regard.
So typically for these types of projects, when people develop properties like this, don't they contribute to kind of like the infrastructure costs associated with the development?
Yeah, if I believe like systems development charges and those types of things and offsite improvements, I think that's pretty normal.
So is the intent by providing funding for the infrastructure to incentivize the development of the lots, the properties, or?
Well, I think that's one way to look at it, but I also think that the port is going to be putting that infrastructure in that not only will benefit the future unknown, yet to be determined use of lot 1. I think that's one of the important elements of this project is that we don't necessarily know what's going to go into lot 1, just that there needs to be infrastructure and utilities brought to that site. So certainly I think that a partnership between the city and the urban renewal district makes sense to try to incentivize any of the public improvements in that area with the tax increment, in addition to providing public amenities along the Nichols Basin area as well. So that, I guess, would be the incentive, is that the tax generated would be able to go into that public area.
Yeah, I could see the benefit to providing the public amenities would be, I think, my priority.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
If I might add something to that, if you don't mind, Kevin.
Sure.
Commissioner Chapman, I think that from the conversations that we've had, it's adding lot 900 helps offset the timeline for the tax basis. But I think that the port is all in agreement that a lot of just what Kevin said is that, we're looking at the urban renewal funds to go towards the infrastructure of Anchor and First, and then the amenities improvements for all public people to use, which then inherently helps whatever development is going to happen on lot 900 as well. Is that a correct assumption, Kevin?
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Thanks for coming out. I'm going to try to make these questions make sense. But you mentioned, so you don't know what is actually going to happen on lot 1. Is setting utilities in specific places going to limit future options for what happens there?
So PPFF, who did the preliminary engineering and the concepts, that we've used in different grant applications. Right along Anchor Way, the stubs would be brought in at the corners so that as development were to occur, they could be brought up primarily to the north. And there'd be another hub, utility stubs that could be brought to the south as well. So it would just basically bring the utilities up along the sidewalks on the corners of those lots. And then as development were to occur, then they would be brought from that spot.
Okay. And then, oh, I forgot what I was gonna. Sorry. I mean, this is gonna be big picture, but you mentioned, and the city's very aware of it, of housing costs, obviously are leading to no one can attract any employees. We're all basically stealing employees from each other, and there aren't enough of them. Does the port really think it's viable to have development for new businesses if we can't staff current ones? I mean, what does that look like?
Oh,
in the short or long
no,
term?
absolutely. I mean, it's, I know, ports have always, we're not allowed to get into housing. But not only are we not allowed by statute to get into housing, we don't typically have residentially zoned lands. I know the Port of Cascade Locks is unique in that they do have some residential zone lands. But that being said, if we can provide some amenities and waterfront elements, I mean, there's still other things that we can be doing as a community to provide value to the waterfront. But absolutely, we understand the priority of the city council, and we're behind your efforts. We agree that the waterfront urban renewal district should be closed down so that you can focus on those priorities out there.
I guess more do you think there are businesses that would actually come to Lot 1 at this point?
I think so. I mean, we do get a lot of interest. I don't know at this point. There hasn't been a real formal RFDI, request for development interest, or anything like that for Lot 1. I know that there's a lot of interest right now, everything from community centers and recreational facilities and restaurants, and there's been a lot swirling around. But for this infrastructure effort, there is no preconceived notion of what at this time would be built on Lot 1.
And then one more question. Just knowing, some of the other streets in there, Lot 1's obviously a port property, new streets being built. Do you see that those would be port streets that then are, charged for parking, that the port is taking that revenue, or how do you see that going in the future?
I believe our plan, from my understanding, is that those would eventually be dedicated to the city. That's my understanding. But again, that's typically how these arrangements work. And so I don't think we would be able to charge parking on a city street if for some reason during the negotiations of the ultimate contract, if it is a port street, then we're looking at lots of different ways to fund our parks that don't include bridge tolls. And so I would say that we would probably continue to implement parking on those streets to offset the cost of the recreational facilities.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that's right.
I missed part of our presentation.
But you did such a good job. You actually said
I
it all.
summed it all up, except that very final slide. Do you think, Jen, can we pull up that final slide? Okay. We have a final slide that just shows the growth in assessed value within that your waterfront area due to the partnership between the city and the port that just kind of sets the expectation for what could happen on the Lot 1, depending on whatever use it is. I guess we don't have to show that, but the growth was tremendous.
The pretty picture here.
Yeah, within the waterfront area. And I can give you, it started out with $5.75 million of investment in the urban renewal. And you got $74.3 million of increased assessed value that will go, when that closes, go back on the property tax rolls for all of the different taxing districts to enjoy the taxes from, plus a lot of new jobs and a beautiful waterfront area. So.
And I don't know where the PowerPoint presentation went, it disappeared, but I think we got the main points across. And, you know, I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to discuss this concept of a smaller urban renewal
We
district.
got a couple more.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your presentation that the port had other economic opportunities they could address if this was created. What are those opportunities?
Well, if you go back, there is the 7,000 square feet of potential retail outlets. So there is, I believe, a commercial overlay zone. So that's a small one.
Separate from lot 1 and 900.
Yeah, yeah.
But there were other opportunities outside of this urban renewal area that you had mentioned.
Oh, I was talking specifically about that. Yeah,
Okay.
about that area. But I mean, you know, we have the airport. I mean, tools subsidize the airport operations. So theoretically, every dollar that we're spending that we can use on the waterfront for recreational opens up money that we can actually be spending either on the marina or on the airport as well.
What makes lot 1 different than any other undeveloped lot around town? And that would require that lot specifically to have the formation of an urban renewal zone just around it.
I think probably the biggest one is it's a fairly large lot that right now has a 0 frozen base. It's in a highly visible location in town. And so there's obviously going to be a lot of community interest in what happens there. And so I think from that nature, just by itself, there's going to be a lot of attention. It's really going to be developed in a public way. And so it really seems like an excellent opportunity for the port and the urban renewal district and the city to kind of collaborate on what ultimately goes there.
And one other related question to the demand that you both had mentioned earlier. If the area is so sought after and there's so much demand for operations down there, why hasn't it been developed yet? Is it a matter of these things going in order for a developer to make it pencil, or is it a developer trying to further along that development?
Well, like I said, we don't have any preconceived notion of, you know, it's not like we have a developer in the wings waiting to pounce or anything like that. So, you know, whether it's a public facility, a community center or something like that, or if it's a restaurant or other commercial or light industrial use, that's going to be what generates this tax increment. And if I understand what the question is it's probably the most scrutinized piece of property in this town because of its high visibility. I mean, it's everything from snow removals, semi trucks get parked there during closures. There's just a lot of attention on that lot. And so I really do think that it's going to take a pretty public process to make sure that whatever happens on that lot is done comprehensively. And I think that this tax increment opportunity is a great way to kind of focus and energize some utility and some public recreational amenities as part of that overall community discussion that's going to happen at some point in the future. Yeah.
Go ahead, then I have 2.
Sorry, so you just mentioned that this could be like a public community space type thing, and would that generate tax revenue? Is that actually possible?
Probably not. You know, that
Okay.
I don't think that would necessarily, you know, these are just ideas that are swirling about. There hasn't been any kind of financial feasibility study or anything like that. You know, there's just been a lot of ideas about what could go there. And so if for some reason there was something like that stayed in the public realm, meaning it wasn't leased or sold, then I guess theoretically the urban renewal district wouldn't be needed because there wouldn't be any TI generated. But what it does is just simply provide options for the community if there is a commercial path forward.
So I don't know if this is for you or for Elaine, but like, would approving an urban renewal district basically mean we couldn't have a public use in the future because we've committed to eventually pay back with tax increment?
No, I would imagine technically it would just, I guess, languish. The urban renewal district wouldn't generate any tax increment, and then it would close or whenever it was appropriate. So if you ended up having a community center that was in the public ownership, there really at that point, and it's all built out and it was all in public ownership, there really wouldn't be a need for the urban renewal district if that's the direction that the Port Commission and the city wanted to go.
And the port would have paid that out and would be fine not getting paid back.
Again, I'm not speaking for the commission, but those are the kinds of conversations that's swirling about, and there is really there's been no position by the Port Commission as to what's going to go on that lot at this time.
Thank you.
Yes. I think I do.
Maybe you can make something of this. I'm with Megan, like, maybe this will make sense. So I heard you say that primary hope, aspiration for this is that it will replace bridge revenue. That lot one can be an economic engine for the port to transition off ramp from the bridge, whatever. If I was a betting man, and as you said, there's a lot of attention paid to this parcel. I've lived here 23 years and nothing has happened on that parcel. And I watched a master plan come and go, and
I think I've seen 5 of them.
yeah, I think it's, not out of the question that in 10 years, we'll still be having this
We
conversation.
might have the bridge before
Yeah,
lot 1
and
develops.
I'm afraid that delays in lot 1 will delay the port's ability to off-ramp from the bridge tolls, and that might harm our chances of getting a new bridge. So I just realized that delay is really looming in my mind as a concern. And I guess that's not even.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, we have a big challenge in front of us. The port does, and it's a priority for the port to make sure that bridge replacement happens. And so my main job is to try to figure out where are the partnerships in this community for our parks and rec demands. What's the future going to be for the marina, and what's the future going to be for the airport? Those are the 3 main subsidies that the toll revenues take care of. And so that's a real priority. And I think that this partnership with this smaller urban renewal district might be a piece of that solution. It's not going to be the golden goose that saves everything, but it could be a small part of this transition to the next phase of what the port is like.
Thank you.
I have 3 quick questions. I think first one is that the land use overlay that we came up with for the waterfront is, I think, completely separate from this. Is that can staff help define whether that's true? I mean, it's in play, but it's all there's a bunch of talk here about what coulds, but it's pretty well defined of what can right now.
The overlay is a matter of the zoning code. However, its uses, the architecture, the standards that are embedded within it that bind private development certainly will have impact on what is feasible and what is not.
Right.
And they are separate, but to be unrelated, I wouldn't call them unrelated at all.
But to the formation of a potential urban growth area, it's
Yeah, they can be independent. They can be independent of that.
Thank you, Justin. Second question is, with the 10-year payoff estimate, that's assuming that and this is sort of to Megan's question, it assumes that some of it becomes decaying buildings and ferment buildings. Is that true that the port would turn those over to the private space and that development would have been enabled, and then that's what generates the tax bases, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then lastly, having a feeling for the timeline for doing a tiny URA formation. Is it a year? Is it meetings through 23? What are we being asked to do timeline wise if the agency decides to put it in place?
So the formal process, regardless of this to adopt an urban renewal plan is typically 5 to 6 months. So that's just all those required meetings by the statute. In this plan, there would be a precursor to that of figuring out what those projects are that you want to identify within the plan. So there would be those meetings and public input, I would think also around that. So it really depends on how much public input and how quickly you could fit in those public meetings to get that front part before the process begins.
Got it. Thank you. Is there other questions? Jim, did you have one? Okay. Christy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not speaking as the whole commission. I'm speaking as my individual self. But I do want to stress that I believe that the direction that the current commission has discussed is that we recognize, again, as Paul mentioned, no one's touched this lot forever because no one wants to mess it up. And I think that this current commission recognizes that this truly needs to be a partnership with the city and the community. And we need to be very thoughtful about what is going to happen moving forward. This Anchor Way and First project gets it ready to go. And in the background, then we need to start having, I believe we need to be working with Parks and Recs. We need to be working with the city. We need to be, and we need to be working with the public, because there's so many wonderful ideas about, festival streets and outdoor spaces and gathering spots. And I think if we're all starting to talk together and involving the community, we can start moving forward on that. But this Anchor Way project has to happen in order for us to even consider anything else. And this just helps. It's one piece of a very big puzzle in my opinion. So.
All right. Thank you. While we're on Zoom land, Heather, do you have any last questions?
I don't have any questions. I just would echo everything Christy said and how motivated the current commission is to really get the ball rolling to develop something down at Lot 1. And the infrastructure is so important.
Sure.
And necessary. And having that small individual section of urban renewal would help it move forward faster.
Okay, thanks. And Gladys, while we're in Zoom land.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any further questions. I'm just really processing everything. It does give me pause to fund something where there isn't a specific plan. But I agree that there is opportunities to partner, and if there are, that we should. So yeah, I'm just processing. Thank you.
Well, and Tim, you had a question.
Yeah. I guess it's a question for Abigail. Given the timeline of this, we obviously have a busy year planned. It's like our dance card is pretty full. How would this fit into what we're doing?
Thank you for the question, Councilor. I appreciate your watching out for us. I anticipate that if council chose to move forward with this, we'd rely heavily on probably a consultant, likely named Elaine, to help us get there. I also anticipate probably in the next year or two coming to the Urban Renewal Agency and asking for some dedicated staff for urban renewal, not specifically for this project, but just as you look at the workload that urban renewal has with it. It's a concern.
I guess this is not really a question, just kind of an observation. Following up on Paul's observations that there have been multiple of these types of plans for that piece of property that have come and gone. Just kind of like reminding folks about kind of like the interplay and the friction between the downtown area and the waterfront. As just kind of an observation, I guess, something Because obviously our downtown is still trying to recoup from the pandemic and doing that whole thing. So I guess that gets to the timing part of it too.
Okay, Abigail, could you help figure out what is the ask of the agency at this point? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was great.
Appreciate it.
Yes, so just thank you. Chair, I know that today's was a presentation, information, questions. I'll check in with you as the chair and mayor on if you want to see this at the next council meeting, if you're ready at that time, or maybe if you've had some time, you can come up with more questions. We can certainly invite Kevin and me back for many meetings. I know they love being here on Monday nights. But ultimately, council needs to come to a decision on whether you wish to authorize a new district. That's the question before you, but that's not the question.
So it feels like there's a rich discussion to be had amongst the agency of should we recommend doing this? And then that would sort of kick off the formation discussions and that kind of stuff. Do we want to have that discussion tonight? I don't know that we have that figured out in our timeline today. I don't know, it's probably a good half-hour thing. Should we? This is the question for agency members, I guess, which is what I see that, Gladys. Hold on one second. Do we have that discussion now, or do we wait to the next agency meeting and have should we stay or should we go this discussion then? Gladys?
Yeah, I think one question that I still haven't figured out, and some of you that have served prior, why wasn't lot 1 developed simultaneously while Freem and everything else was built at the same time? I guess that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Like, why wasn't something done to that specific area, in all of the development that's taken place down there?
I can say, having witnessed the overlay plan get implemented, it sort of was implemented in the order that it was logically going to go. So it wasn't a surprise, I don't think, but how much gas was on that? The development fire was completely up to the market, right? And the port and stuff. So I don't have an answer. That's my thing. I don't know, Kevin, if you want to add anything more to that, you're welcome to come up and do that.
Cheers, Samuel. I think that there was a certain point that predates me, and it honestly predates Kevin. But we had a waterfront stormwater issue that council passed a resolution several years ago that dedicated all of the remaining urban renewal dollars to that project.
We did lose a little bit of that one wind in the sail with the pipe. That's very, very true. Paul?
And also, the restrictions on different parts of the waterfront are not all the same. And so there are some rules about what lot 1 can be that are different from what ferment could be and so forth. It's a super complicated thing that I don't pretend to know all about, but I was here watching.
To that, I think, Gladys, that that question and your feelings about it sort of come out in this discussion that's to be had, right? We just finished, here's the presentation. My sense is that we should do this in the next agency meeting as opposed to today. We've got the information now that we have sort of a rich debate. Not a long time from now, the next meeting kind of thing. Does anyone wish that we auger into it right now instead of that?
Can I ask a question? I think of Abigail. I thought you had said at the beginning of this meeting that it would be a discussion of council versus the agency. Can you speak on that?
That's right. It is a council decision whether to create a new urban renewal district. So, Chair General, are you asking for the agency to convene and have a full conversation, or for council to hold a work session and then at some point have it?
I'm asking for the agency to reconvene so that the agency can ask council to proceed with a formation or not.
Certainly, we could ask, you all could choose to have an additional agency meeting this month if you'd like. We could tack that on to your 27th meeting, or we could do it in March, depending on what your timeline is. I think you heard from Elaine and Kevin that they're a little bit anxious on. But that is 100% your decision.
Yeah, I mean, if someone has a sense of urgency that my suggestion is not being respectful to, please tell us. Okay, I see a no over there. Anyone on the agency feel like we need to do this now versus the agency meeting in March?
Well, as she mentioned, it was possible for the 27th as well.
Oh, sure. I didn't
That would be
even-
an
Day today, additional meeting. That we could add a.
How much do you want to say on 27th?
Yeah, I'm headed for that too. I don't want to, Paul's gone on March 13th or whatever day that is, so we don't want to do it. I think we should have a full group. So can we tentatively schedule a agency meeting for the piece for the 27th?
Okay.
We talked about this.
We can do that.
Yeah, I don't want to, not to confound things. I mean, really, the ask is do we feel good enough about this? Actually, kind of like elevated up to the council.
Right.
Is that really?
Yeah, that's the, if the agency says, yeah, we think this is, the finishing lot, doing this for lot one is a good idea, then it goes to council for a decision to say, start a formation process with whoever.
Is it giving an approval, or is it just saying that we think it's worth?
It's totally a council decision, so, the RA can certainly have the conversation, you all can almost kind of make a recommendation to yourselves, but it is a council decision.
Christy, Heather, are you hip to doing a meeting on the 27th?
I'm fine with the 27th, and I would be more than happy to, if there was some question posed about history and all of that, and I'd be happy to work with Kevin and maybe in advance of that meeting, kind of help put together just some more informational stuff and kind of hopefully communicate with you guys kind of where the commission is right now with our focuses and all of that, just so you guys have a better, more transparent understanding of what we're looking at here as far as the amount of public improvements that we want to do for the community benefit. Whereas I know you've all seen the plans before of the, quote unquote, typical light industrial business park. And so I think there's probably some more information that could help you guys consider stuff. And I'd be happy to get that to you guys in advance.
Right, if the port wants to add more info for that discussion, I think that's great. So do we have thumbs up for 27th? Sweet.
So if I can ask, just for thinking about framing that, if there are questions or other information that you need answered in order to make a decision, you can let me know that, and I can work with Kevin, and we can put some pieces together. Maybe there's a memo we can set up ahead of time, because I know this is all really new. It takes a lot to process this, so I want to give you whatever information you need ahead of time, so that when you come on the 27th, you're ready to discuss.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. All right, before we do the next item on the agenda, I have to apologize and say that 2 seconds in the first meeting as the chair of this committee, I failed to do public comment requests. So if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak to the Urban Renewal Agency, this is a good time to do it. So of the three of you, anyone? All right. And online, right? Thank you. Jen, is there anyone waving their virtual hand around? All right, cool. All right, so the next item, and Abigail, maybe you can help kick this off, is the annual statement.
That's right, and I believe that Elaine Howard has just a very brief overview for you. I don't think we have a PowerPoint for this one.
I didn't know this was the next one, so once, yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Every year you need to go report on the annual statement.
We're not making a motion.
That's right.
We're just
Receiving the report.
receiving the report. One of the white buttons will make everything happy.
I'm Elaine Howard. I helped Monica prepare your annual financial statement this year since she was in that role with Will having left. My firm helps a number of urban renewal agencies across the state do these. They are required by ORS 457.460. It's different from your audit that you have to do every year. So it's a report really that's supposed to go to all the different taxing districts. That's the real reason this was put into the statute. The report covers both what you spent in the prior year and what you expect to spend in the next year. It is required to cover the impacts to the taxing districts in your different urban renewal areas. And it is required to cover what maximum indebtedness you have remaining within each of your urban renewal areas. So it's just as those four basic components. Some urban renewal agencies use it as more of a public relations tool where they tell a little bit more about what their projects are, because you are required to send it to all of your different taxing jurisdictions. And you are required to publish a notice in the newspaper that you have this available if anybody wants to read it. So that is what it is. It's prepared and ready for your acceptance.
Any agency questions for the annual report that's in annual statement? It's in the packet. Great.
I'm just going to preach for half a second. I was reading in the Oregonian recently about some really controversial uses of urban renewal tools in Portland. And I just have come to realize over the years that urban renewal has been spectacularly successful in our little city. And that's good luck and good planning and all that. And I guess just want to convey that to you all that like this has been an amazing tool. I mean, 5 million into 75 million, we heard 20 minutes ago, but over and over and again, it's been a great tool for us. And it's not perfect. And sure I'm going to get tweeted at, but it's been so successful for us. Great.
Gladys? Okay.
No questions.
No questions for Heather.
Christie?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Elaine. That's it. There we go. Next, we're now. We move to regular business. Is there anything else on the together?
Nope, that's it. We have one more thing.
Right.
And I apologize, I clearly copied from an older cover sheet, because this is not the correct title for this item. We have awarded some recommendations several months ago. This item is the update on the feasibility plan for the feasibility study for the West Side Urban Renewal. Apologize for that. The information in the memo was correct. So today I'll just say a couple items, and then do you have your PowerPoint up? Do you need any help?
It's ready. I
Got it.
think as soon as
Awesome. So you will, I remember that last, actually November of 2021, so a year, more than a year ago, we as city staff came to you with the urban renewal idea that you then liked, and so we've been studying. And that was to create an urban renewal district on the west side, with the assumption that the waterfront district, or now the 109 acres in the waterfront district, would like this close, allowing for most of that acreage to become available. The west side urban renewal district would probably be about 400, somewhere in the 400 acres neighborhood. And our goal for this would be to implement 3 plans we have already adopted. The first one is the transportation system plan, the affordable housing strategy, and with other jurisdictions, the multi-jurisdictional parks. So we have receiving that direction from you and from council. We've been moving forward with Elaine and her company and her colleagues. With that, we have had a couple months of working on the feasibility plan, which is the first stage. And so Elaine's here to give us just an update on the feasibility piece. And my question to you as you listen to Elaine is just what other information do you need before we move forward. The feasibility of the first stage, then we intentionally put in kind of a pause to say yes or no to actually moving forward with the district. So that's the piece I bring to you today. It's conversation, but ultimately we are looking for a decision sometime fairly soon. Elaine and I, outside of this, are attending meetings with other taxing districts to present to them what this might look like for them and what the impacts might be. According to ORS, they are being informed and consulted that we don't need their approval, except for the county, because the urban district or urban renewal district has proposed would include parts of the unincorporated area. So I think in March, we will be presenting findings so far with the county, and then ultimately we'll need to go back to them if you decide to move forward for the approval of the plan this summer.
So what's the ask for tonight in our discussion is to learn and ask questions?
That's right. And then what else do you need to know? What information can I bring back or Elaine bring back to you to make a decision either at your next meeting, the next city council meeting, or
Gotcha.
yeah.
And then Elaine, are you gonna lay out what are the next steps in the March? Okay,
That's
cool.
great. I think, Elaine, did I miss anything?
Nope.
Then I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I'm Elaine Howard. I've been working on this study with Nick Hoppenett from Tiberius Solutions. He's been very involved in this portion because a feasibility study is a large part of it is the financial feasibility of just looking at the potential of an area and saying how much tax increment revenues do we think can be produced over a period of time to allow you to do projects within that area. So Nick has been very active with your staff looking at potential financial framework for making his findings. And how do I move that?
Sure.
So the first thing that we did was meet with your staff and talk about potential projects within the area. All of the information that I'm giving you tonight is very draft. So this is the first list of potential projects that the city has put together that takes information from the 3 plans that Abigail mentioned. There are transportation projects, parks and trails projects, and affordable housing projects, knowing that you're really looking at those 3 buckets of types of projects to implement within the West Side area. It shows potentially those projects that might occur in the first 8-year timeframe, and then from 8 to 15 years, and then further out into the future, the 15 to 25 years. So it knows that looking at those projects in those 3 different buckets will be important to work those projects together. And I am not prepared to go through each one of those individual projects on this sheet, but Dustin is here. If you, I'll go through the presentation first, and if you want to come back to that, I'm sure Dustin would be happy to answer any questions about those projects. Along with those projects, we were given just some basic information about the potential costs of those different buckets. So the transportation projects were about 48 million, the parks and trails 9.6 million, affordable housing 23.3 million, administration 6.5, for a total cost in today's dollars, 2023 dollars, of $87.2 million. We then set the boundary for the area with the city and looking at what property should be included, knowing that you probably would use up the majority of that acreage that you have to be able to put into urban renewal. You may only put 25% of your total city acreage into urban renewal. And so you still have the Heights District that will keep on going the Columbia Cascade is no longer counted in that acreage department because you've quit taking tax increment revenues. And then you expect the waterfront district to close this year. So looking at this district, they looked at making it as big as they possibly could to fulfill your goals in those 3 different categories. This is an initial TIF revenue forecast. It is, it has not been, this is just hot off the presses. It has not been reviewed with staff once this has come out. So we know that these will change. But basically what it lets you know is that in the capacity of, and that should be $2023, not 2022. They're given the projections that city staff had about what development could and would happen within that area, that you have the capacity to fund projects of about $103 million within the area. And what we looked at for the potential project costs were $87.2 million. So it looks like as we finesse things, we know that the TIF revenue probably could cover those $87 million worth of project costs. So that's the good news. The projections go through 25 years. So a lot of new plans that I've been working on are 30-year plans. I really like 25-year or less plans just because of the impacts on the other taxing districts and sooner. And that impact is also on the city of Hood River itself. So in terms of where we go with this TIF revenue projection is we will have a meeting again with your staff to go over those projected numbers, see if they feel like they should be adjusted or not, whether the time frame should be adjusted, and then be able to finalize those numbers. But what we do know is the numbers won't increase beyond this, because you are very near the ORS 457 has limitations on the amount of maximum indebtedness in relationship to the total assessed value of an area. And this is near that limitation, doesn't exceed it, but near that limitation. So we know that no matter what we do, we probably won't go above this. So we felt comfortable sharing it just to let you know the maximum, knowing that it could be less than that. So that we would understand that, yes, that area looks like it's feasible, looks like it's feasible to do that amount of projects. A lot of that always depends on the amount of development that actually occurs. We can make projections about what we think occurs, but if we have a 10-year recession within the time frame, then that will change those assumptions. So again, just looking at the projects and capacity, it totally looks like in a feasibility study that this area could be a successful area and in a limited time frame. The other thing that we've been working on is an equity framework for the plan. The city has its own equity framework. We have been looking for an equity framework for both the development of this plan and the implementation of it. The overarching principles that we're looking at are clarity, transparency, comprehensive vision, commitment to equity, and then considering long-term effects of your investments to make sure that you aren't causing harm. And one of you was saying you were reading about Portland districts, and that's been the long-standing criticism of urban renewal in Portland is the displacement and gentrification that's occurred because of it. And so we talked up front about, and even I think in your request for proposals, we talked about developing this equity for a framework to make sure that as you were proceeding, that you were conscious of and taking efforts to understand and deal with any of those potential issues. So that framework, we had a call today, and I think that was our third call, and we're working with Echo Northwest on that. Cadence Petros worked with Abigail, I think, in Beaverton, but Cadence is well known for her ability to understand and put together information on that. And so they will be developing that final equity framework for us to follow. And if the agency and city council decides to proceed with the development of the plan and the 5-year action plan that would go with that. The key questions for the feasibility stage and the equity framework were, did we reach all constituencies in the previous planning? Who did we not reach? And are there additional questions specific to the plan that should be revisited? So Jackie, your new, I'm not sure of her title, public
Community engagement coordinator.
has been great working with us. She has gone back and looked at your other 3 planning efforts to identify the multitude of meetings that you've had and identify the people who were involved in those and to identify if we've missed anybody. And we're working on doing that identification and making sure that if this moves forward into the urban renewal plan, that all constituencies are reached. So it's a really nice effort on the city's part to do that. The next steps in terms of this planning would be for the as Abigail said, the contract has a provision that after we present you the feasibility study information, which will be very soon after we review that financial piece with staff, that the city council makes a decision whether or not to proceed with the full development of the plan. So as Abigail said, what we're looking for is what other information do you need to be able to know that you'd like to go ahead and develop the plan, and the plan will have goals and objectives and those specific projects identified. It will have that equity framework. It will have laid out the specific spending on projects over time and the impacts to the taxing districts.
All right.
Get the screen back. Don't move. Oh, thank you, Jen.
That was it, right? You ready for questions?
And I got through the whole slideshow this time. I didn't skip any slides.
I thought maybe there was a surprise coming. Again, let's start with the Zoomers. Gladys, do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I do. I appreciate the information. When you talk about equity, what do you mean? Is it the constituents that have been reached or those constituents that haven't been reached? I'm having a hard time understanding what the last slide meant.
So what we've been talking about in our discussions about it is making sure that no constituencies are left out, because sometimes people are not reached, not because they aren't interested, but because they don't know what's going on, or you haven't made the effort to reach them where they are. They may not be comfortable coming to meetings. Diversity, equity, and inclusion means people who, I mean, you have that in your city framework, is people who traditionally have not been the benefit of the public efforts. So making sure that all areas of your community, all people in your community are benefited and that no one is harmed. And that's what we're looking at. So for example, if you were doing a project and you thought it was going to cause residential displacement, you need to evaluate how is that something we really want to do? How are we going to relocate people? If we are going to relocate them, is the benefit of that project greater than the negative to those people who are impacted? So it's looking at your actions and making sure that you are treating all people equitably.
Thank you for that. Does that mean that you're going to have some sort of committee that I guess is guiding the work moving forward? Like,
A committee guiding the work?
Yeah, or is it that you're just making a one-time ask of these individuals to help you understand or ensure that you're getting feedback from constituents? Will it be a one-time thing? Is it going to be an ongoing ask?
The equity framework will become embedded in the plan. So it's not saying, well, just for this development of the plan, we're going to meet with a group once and ask them if we're doing things right. There'll be a framework for how to implement your projects and for how to work with community to make sure that people are involved. So you already have an Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. We'll be vetting through them, but we are also, as part of this framework, looking at getting our materials translated into Spanish. making sure that meetings are accessible, making sure that the website that has information is accessible to everyone. So that's the project planning part, but we also hope to embed that equity framework in the implementation of the plan throughout.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Thanks, Gladys. Heather, any questions with us?
Excuse me. So we're still in sort of the exploratory phase right now. So it feels a little vague to me. So I don't really have any specific questions at this time.
Cool. Christy?
Yeah, I'm good. Yes, initial process. Thank you.
Great. Okay. You have a list of the assumptions you made regarding tax increment financing. Assumptions made regarding land or housing prices or how quickly those properties will be developed.
We made a lot of assumptions, and what we can do is summarize. So I mean, that'll be one thing. That's a good question. We can summarize those and send them on to you. We looked at the properties in different zoning categories, obviously, and then made assumptions about the development potential of those properties. So I anticipated this question might come up. And so I asked Nick to give me an answer to it. So he says, the forecast of TIF revenue relies heavily on the assumptions for the value and timing of future construction activity in the area. City staff identified the amount of vacant and redevelopable acres within each zone within the boundary. There are a total of 213 developable acres, most of which is zoned either R1, 103 acres, or C2, 78 acres. And I can send this to you. You don't have to write it all down. For each zone, city staff and the consultant team agreed on a set of assumptions regarding what mix of land uses are likely to develop, the density of those land uses, the value of the new improvements per acre or per housing unit, and the pace of development. Ultimately, this analysis estimates over 1,300 new housing units and 90 acres of commercial industrial construction, which will be developed in the area over the next 30 years. This new construction is estimated to add $664 million of new assessed value to the tax rolls in 2023 dollars. And we do have that backup of what those assumptions were for residential and for commercial. So if you would like us to send you that detail, we can do that.
Sure. How does that pace compare to other urban renewal zones? Is that a pace that other areas have experienced?
We do financial forecasts differently in every city because there are different variables in every city. So you look at some cities, we did an urban renewal area in John Day, and they had not had one new residential unit developed in the previous 10 years. So you couldn't do any forecast based on development. Hood River has a lot of development happening and a lot of demand. So those assumptions are based upon market activity and what expectations are. What happens is if those assumptions are too aggressive, is it will take longer for the urban renewal area to meet its maximum indebtedness. It won't negatively impact the city or the urban renewal agency because you won't be able to actually go out and incur debt until you incur debt based upon the amount of tax increment revenues that are actually coming in. So it may, the worst is it may lead people's expectations to be higher than they should in terms of how quickly things may happen.
Hypothetically, let's say we create this tomorrow and shortly thereafter in this summer, there's a housing roll for whatever reason. How much would that skew off, or how much are your forecasts sensitive to that sort of economic condition happening over this next year?
Our forecasts do not build in recessions. So if we go into a recession, what happens is because you can't predict recessions and you can't predict how long a recession is going to be. And so you do a forecast, and and usually you make sure your forecasts are not too aggressive. So a reasonable forecast based on past trends, and then past trends reflect recessions in them. So you just make sure that you aren't way out there in terms of what you're projecting. And if a recession hits, yes, things will go a little more slowly for that time period. And then you make up for it when you rebound.
You know what rate offhand you're using for your long-term trend line?
I don't think we used an exact rate here, but I can ask Nick to give me an average before the next meeting of what it would be, because what we used was the development forecast instead of using a rate. Sometimes we just do use a rate. We'll say 4.5%. So that's the 3% that we get because all our taxes go up by 3% every year. And then 1.5 above that. Here, there was so much undeveloped land, but also so much potential that if there is infrastructure to serve that land, it's going to develop, that we thought it was more accurate to look at the developable land and make projections instead of just doing a flat rate. But I can ask Nick to relate that into what a flat rate would be.
In the plan, there is note of 3 affordable housing projects, which would not be taxed based on land rate of that. I assume that's included in the forecast.
Correct.
All that space.
Thanks.
Great.
Oh, I did. I heard a click. Sorry.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Go on this way, okay. I suppose this might be for Abigail, just for my education. So the closeout of Columbia Cascade and Waterfront are both necessary for this to begin. One of them.
And actually Lee might be able to help, but I believe with Columbia Cascade, because it is no longer collecting, it does not count toward that acreage total.
Okay.
So it's not a factor. With Waterfront, you would need to close that, or it would need to stop collecting, which is, it's at that point anyway, in order to free up those acres for a west side. So Waterfront currently is 109 acres, I believe. So, you know, if we keep 9 to 20 for the court proposal, you need to take those off the top, and then the others could go to a west side district. So I think our assumption has been the west side district, as in the initial boundary staff have made in our assumptions, is I think 445.
Thank you.
I think what I'm hearing you say, Elaine, is that it's feasible.
Is what?
It's feasible.
It is.
That's fine. I'm okay with that. Thank you.
I'm gonna slightly go off of Grant's thing. One, I would also love to see the methodology. And then I think phrasing some of his questions in a really vague way of the, like, when you guys were looking at past market trends and expected future market trends, did you go with the optimistic scenario, the like playing it a little safe scenario, or the like really safe scenario?
Dustin, you want to?
That it was neither wasn't safe or vicious. There was a high development. There's really 4 outcomes that we looked at in terms of forecast being fast growth, slow growth, high value, low value. That's kind of like the 4 quadrants. I think we landed somewhere in the middle, and we actually blended it. So rather than going 4, we believe that initially we would have a slow startup and low pool of money to work from. In the middle, we would have easy, more accessible projects that would blend a growing growth in resources available, as well as sites and private development that became easier to attract. And then it tapers off at the tail end with a lot of resources available, and only those sites that are left for your 30-year horizon and seeing a taper. That actually kind of reflects what we see here in our urban renewal trends, where not a lot happens in the beginning. We hit a sweet spot in the power band of resources and sites where private capital and public money become available. There's a reaction there. And then at the end, much like your lot 1 conversation, things begin to taper off where the most ambitious and often most complicated projects are left to remain. So we use that in our analysis.
Thank you. The 445 acres, did that include all 109 from waterfront or?
I don't think so. I think with the fact that Columbia Cascade doesn't count, I think we have a pretty good cushion. But
Okay,
I can do that math.
okay. I forgot my other question, so.
The top line number on one of the slides was net TIF of 187 million. Mine. But how does that differ from the 103? What's that number mean?
Yes. You probably have that slide or can get that in your packet. Or maybe not. The net TIF is the total amount of tax increment proceeds necessary to service the debt. So if you take out debt and pay interest, so it includes those interest payments on debt.
Spending money sooner rather than waiting till.
That's right. That's right.
Got
That's
it.
right.
Okay.
So saying I want to buy a property out there to land bank it so that I have it for the future, but I don't have the money now, but I can borrow. So then, so on that chart, we had net TIF, then we had maximum indebtedness. Maximum indebtedness is that total statutory amount of money over the full time period. So in this case, 25 years. Then the next line is dollars for projects. So that's taking inflation, an inflation factor, and we use 3% on that, which is typically, I know right now it's not right, but typically an average inflation factor. So that figures that in, and that's your dollars for projects, and that equaled that 103,000.
Interest and inflation, but I understand. Thank you.
Kind of going off of that, I think I maybe confused myself there, but so we would be able to do 103, so we wouldn't be able to do the borrowing to get to the 186 million, or we can only borrow a certain amount for future.
You can borrow what's on the MI maximum indebtedness line. So
So up to the 160,
yeah, I can tell you I've got it on here.
and it would be, we would have the financial feasibility to take
So
back that.
160 million is what you can borrow. But what that actually buys you over 25 years is $103 million of projects in today's dollars, because those projects will cost more in the future.
Right, but there is the money to buy the 160 in whatever the
In
dollar-
future
Okay,
costs.
I got you.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Then I just had one, we had talked about a timeline where we could have the formation complete before the next, are we still?
We're still on that.
Still on it?
We need by first part of March, a nod to move ahead. If we get that by the first part of March, we are on our timeline.
And then Abigail, that's a council question?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't, did anyone think of any other questions while we were going around the horn here? All right, hearing none, I think that we don't have an action item other than to say thank you. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for being all our presentation.
Thanks. It's the first time I've had to do this at three for one meeting.
The trifecta. Cool. Items from agency members, we can close up this piece. Doug.
None for me.
Jim? Hey, all? Okay. Heather? Gladys says no. Christie?
No, thank you.
And the chair has none. So we are adjourned from the Urban Renewal Agency part of this fun fest.
Great, back to the city council. It's been 90 minutes, so I suggest we take a 4-minute break.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Good night.
Honest 4 minutes, people, good job. We have business from the audience and there are two people, Lorraine Lyons, I'm gonna invite up first. The way it works, you come up here and if you can be concise in 3 minutes, that'd be great.
3 minutes. Okay. I am Lorraine Lyons. I am the co-owner of 64, just kitty corner from here. And I knew you were going to go over the food cart ordinance today, and I wanted to bring up the subject of parklets and whether or not that should be part of that. It has been a wonderful program in that the public has been so supportive and wants more of them. And there's been some discussion with downtown business owners of having more of them and using more of the spaces per block face, so on and so forth. One of the issues that we've run into is that everyone wants to be on those parklets outside. And when the program was initially introduced, we were allowed one per block space. And then we ran into Matt Zwihart from Double said, rather than have one here and one here, could I put two? And the city graciously allowed us to have two. ODOT almost took them away. And thanks to your predecessor, we were able to go with two the first year. In the subsequent year, we were not allowed that second parklet. So what happens to our business in the summer, which is our money-making time of the year, and we suffered some significant loss with the pandemic, and were thankfully recipients of a substantial EIDL loan to get through. We end up in the summer with an empty parklet and we cram 12 people into one. We end up with an empty tap house and we end up with 12 people crammed onto a parklet. So our revenue for the last 2 summers has literally been 50% of what it could be if we had two. The additional wants is if we could make the parklets more similar. For instance, Andrew built a beautiful, double space parklet. And if we could have more of something like that, and how we would do that, I don't know, that would be another downtown business project, I guess. But as I visited other cities, for instance, Walla Walla, all of their parklets were similar. They had similar chairs, they had similar umbrellas, and it really added such a welcome feeling to the whole downtown. So I would like, as May is right around the corner, to have the city consider, what that might look like going forward. And also I wanted you to know that our concerns as business owners downtown and being able to continue to be downtown. Summer is when we make hay, and we're really limited. And frankly, we've been limited because we have one grouchy neighbor. The cities, the visitors and residents have been in favor of us having more space, and we have one grumpy neighbor who doesn't, and the decision has basically fell because one person isn't comfortable.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And Doug Baker.
Actually, Mayor, if I may, Mr. Baker is here to talk about the Big River Community Land Trust. So he'll join me when we talk about the regular item.
Great.
And may I also, since I have opportunity, may I ask that we move that up in the agenda so we can let Mr. Baker get on with his.
Both those sound like great ideas.
Thank you.
So our new plan is we're putting off the public hearing, is that right? We're gonna put Big River sooner than before the public hearing, or what are you suggesting?
If it pleases council.
It pleases
love
this
to-
mayor.
Would love to handle that one item and then we can go back to. the-
Great, so everybody down on regular council number 4, number 1, Big River Community Land Trust, we're gonna talk about that right now. Is that correct? Great.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Page 16. Take us away.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. This will be very quick because this is an item that you as council entertained and directed your city manager to execute necessary documents. Big River Community Land Trust, if you remember, approached us about a parcel on Tucker. It now has an address. It's 1676 Tucker. It did not have an address before. It's a city-owned parcel that used to have a PRV, a pressure release valve on it. When our attorney, Deborah Phillips, took a look at the resolution that we had passed at that time, she had some concerns, wanted to see some things changed. And that's why I bring it back to you tonight. Those items are listed on that memo that you have in your packet. But I also want to take this opportunity for the president of Big River Community Land Trust, Mr. Baker, to give you a quick update on where they are in their process and if you have any questions for him. And then I'm looking for a motion to authorize the city manager to execute the documents. All right.
Welcome, Doug. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor and council members. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you for entertaining this. The Land Trust is really looking forward to getting this land and building soon on it. I moved back to the community. I was born in Hood River and moved back after having a career around the country a couple of years ago. And luckily, my wife and I were able to afford it and come back close to family. We were among the few fortunate ones that could afford to do it. And it really has struck me since coming back how difficult it is. In fact, my kids wanted to come move here. Couldn't do it, couldn't afford to live in the area. And there's so many families like that that have either rented their whole life and now don't have any lifetime savings to stay here. You know, they've got to move on. So really tragic. Where are we? We hope to acquire the land now. We have a pro bono architect that will design it for us. That is Mark Van Zanden from Surround Architecture. And we have a contractor lined up, Ethan Beck of Ethan Beck Homes. We've got an excavator, Rapid River, who will do it pro bono to do the groundwork for us. And the board has agreed to do the construction financing that will be paid back by the homeowners when the house is completed. So we've got key pieces in place. We also worked with ODOT and identified whether or not we could actually get a driveway off that state road, and we can. So that's good. That would have been difficult to build a house and not be able to get to it. So I think we are in a pretty good position to go forward. And has everybody worked with the Land Trust or kind of know nutshell how they work? I can give a 1-minute overview if you want. Grant, okay. So a community land trust is a not-for-profit organization. It acquires land, maybe through a donation from a city, and then holds it in perpetuity. Then we build a house on it at a low cost, and we aim for houses in the 0.8 to 1.2 range of median family income. But we hold the land in perpetuity. We sell the building to them with a stipulation that when they sell it, the increase in value is limited, and in our case to 1.5% per year increase. So that gets toward the leaky bucket problem. You build a low or an affordable home, but then somebody flips it and sells it to somebody from somewhere else that's got a lot of money and doubles the price or whatever on it. This keeps the house in the affordable stock, so you can build your inventory over time. And it's really a solution, I think, for this city and an awful lot of cities around the country that are in places that are beautiful like us and high demand, with really a global demand, not just a local demand. So you can operate these and identify the kinds of people that you want to be able to purchase them, like local residents with certain incomes. And so it really does target the housing and keeps it in the inventory for a long period of time. So we're very much looking forward to getting this project underway to demonstrate to you that we can do it, and then hopefully plant a seed with you that we'd like to do a lot more and help solve some of these problems here in the community.
Thanks for your good work. I appreciate the volunteer element of this.
Yeah, well, it's a real pleasure to do it. It's something near and dear to my heart. So I thank you for considering this, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
So in the interest of time, happy to have questions or a motion. Yes, Meg.
I have one question or edit, and not for you, actually. But I am really excited for the progress. Thank you for coming. But this is pedantic, but it's what I brought up in the resolution and in the deed. It says construction of a single family home, and I had asked that we change it in the resolution to unit of affordable housing, just in case there's some flexibility that they don't do a single family home and they can do something else. And so I was wondering if council was cool with changing that again.
If I could respond quickly, Councilor Saunders shared this question with me earlier. I checked in with Big River Community Land Trust. They were fine with that change, but I have not checked with Deborah Phillips. So I just need to. It could be that we specifically say 80 to 100, 120 AMI simply to define what we mean by it as affordable.
And just the sort of out pedantic, like affordable housing is, in my opinion, an industry term. And it often does not mean 80 to 120, it means like 60. So as long as it's a small A, I would more, I mean, no.
We defined it in the deed, which is why I'm using that term, but I'm open to whatever gets us to just not saying you must do a single family dwelling if that gives them more flexibility. And again, I'm aware, given the size of this lot, it may be irrelevant. So I don't want to slow this down if that is what would stop this, because I do want it to happen.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, council? I would entertain a motion. Page 17.
Are you gonna move with the change or?
Yes, Abigail, do you think it's appropriate? Is that going to stop anything?
I think you probably can move without that. That was a small piece of me. Double check with Deborah. I guess if she has objections to it, do I need to bring it back to you, or are you okay with it as it is?
And I say, I move that we authorize the city manager to execute necessary documents on behalf of the city to convey fee title to tax lot 500 to Big River Community Land Trust with the suggested change if appropriate, but if it will delay things to go forward.
That sounds like. By Saunders. Second by Paulson. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vote.
If you guys talk, can you guys please turn your mics on? Sorry.
Thank you, Gladys, for the reminder. Sorry about that. Great, so that happened. Excellent. Now back to our previous agenda. We now have a public hearing. Is that correct? Good. And I have a script. Is that correct? That is correct. Here we go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. All right. I call to order a public hearing to consider an ordinance amending Title V relating to mobile food vendors. A quorum of council is present, and prior to taking testimony, does anyone from council have any bias or conflict of interest they need to disclose or would prevent them from participating? Great. Would anyone in attendance care to challenge the council members' participation? Staff.
Thank you. Again, this is a public hearing. You have heard this matter in discussion in November. It relates to what is essentially your food cart ordinance. At council's request, we drafted some amendments to your current title that would allow the placement of food carts essentially for all year. Currently, under the current regulations, a cart must move or discontinue operation every 6 months. We evaluated some of the alternatives that really became and had essentially a 2-year test pilot, because during the pandemic, we did not require these carts to move. It was a difficulty for our regulators who were handling other public health matters, and especially public health. And it really presented some challenges and opportunities for these businesses to serve in social distance. So as a part of the greater response effort, which included the use of on-street parklets, we allowed you allowed these businesses to stay in place longer than the 6-month tenure. After really the pandemic response started winding down, there was an expressed interest that we allow this current practice to remain in place. Therefore, we have proposed changes essential in the code to allow a full year without a move as a prerequisite to license. So The changes that are included are based upon public input. We had almost 2,000 responses from an online survey that went viral. Some of those people lived in the city and some of those people worked in the city. And but overwhelmingly between the parklet as well as the food cart survey, a vast majority were supportive. We also did some investigations regarding our neighboring communities, what they did to organize this, how they administer it. Portland, Sandy, Silverton, Gresham were all some source documents that we looked at. But really the issue and how this has operated for the past 2 years became really some of the biggest indicators of what we would face in terms of problems, issues, and things that we would want to address on your behalf. From the parklet standpoint, there's really, and after speaking with the attorney, there's nothing we need to change in the municipal code to allow this to continue. So we presume, really based on the information we received last time, that will just become a program rolled into the city's really portfolio of programs without conflict to the code. Something you will be able to consider later is how you charge a fee for that. That's really regular business that comes along with just the routine work of the year. But as far as the food carts, you have a strikes and underline version within your code. Really, I tried to keep it within the confines of what you do now to assess the businesses, to really be a pretty surgical and not to over regulate this thing with speculation. So the changes that occurred within there have to do with allowing the business to be there every year, to acknowledge some code miscues in terms of citations that were wrong, and then put a ceiling on what we saw as probably when the threshold between what a license and what a land use approval would be. So we kept it in the license criteria until we ended up with a request for more than 4 on a single site. At that point, you start getting a little impacts grow, and really this aligns and separates what would be a food cart pod of 4 or more commercial businesses to remain there for an indefinite amount of time and someone whose license is in place. So that's included in there as well. We'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you, Justin. Questions? Here.
Yeah, I suppose, in terms of the overwhelming positive response from the community about parklets and food carts, I'm happy to see that we're finally getting this ordinance put into motion. I think that some of the things that, in terms of looking at other communities, I think there's a lot that goes into the food cart aspect of it. But can you talk a little bit more about what was learned about parklets in other communities and lessons learned there in general?
Well, really, we are one of the out in front parklet groups. And I think it's interesting is, I think what Lorraine had mentioned is the difference between allowing individuals to do it and allowing the city to be the sponsor and taking the lead. So some of the cities have allowed individual businesses to take account for them, and it's a license to allow you to use the right of way. Some cities have gone out and said, this is our program. We will build their parklets. They will be public property and we'll administer them, allowing the public to use it. We allow the businesses to do it rather than it become a city operated program. And that's one of the big differences. A lot of them have allowed them to remain in place. I think one thing that's unique about us is we have so few streets that are arterials. You have like Portland, really push theirs, but they also have a grid network where they could, unlimited number of routes that you can take to avoid it. What I've found was our relationship with ODOT and the few arterial streets we have to work around and to navigate the city, and our topographic constraints really made it something that we needed to be mindful of. And I think that was something that had separated us. I think really our allowance to allow them to transfer around the 1 per block face. We've never gotten to the point where we've maxed them out because I think for the owner's perspective, they have to be responsible for them. They have to have staff. They have to, like most of the were related to hospitality. Some of the restrictions from OLCC to have eyes on them really limited, those who were interested in them. So we've yet to see reach the ceiling. That's really, with the few number of issues that we had experienced, there's really recommendation to keep it going alive. So.
Thank you.
The memo states that the public was supportive to a very large degree, so long as safety and sanitation were addressed. I know that this may not be your responsibility, but can you address how safety and sanitation aspects will be addressed?
Yeah, this was something that also came up from the health department. We had reached out to them in particular. The health department expressed concerns about safety and sanitation because their authority is really limited to the cart. And so when it comes to property maintenance and the condition of the property surrounding it, they expressed the need to have partners such as us who had the ability and the will to enforce property maintenance issues. And we have a code enforcement program. We do property maintenance. So nothing really needed to be changed in this. That's kind of general applicability, whether it's a food cart, whether it's a commercial establishment, we have the authority to take those into account. And we use that now.
So getting like folded into the license somehow? Or?
Well, I
guess what I'm kind of hearing from the public is that there's a concern, even given the existing conditions about those.
I think it was more of a caveat than less than a concern.
I guess
But
what I'm saying is I've actually heard of it.
So
Like overflowing garbage cans, those types.
well, I think that what we've heard for overflowing garbage cans is ours.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was necessarily generated from food carts. That was generated from to-go orders from brick and mortar that all of a sudden had the transition to we're no longer brick and mortar, we're food to go. So I think in terms of our experience, that was something that really is what pushed the limits and had Public Works going out to the waterfront 3 times a day, trying to keep up with trash. And I think it was less reliant on the food carts because keeping tables and chairs out of that, they're not allowed tables and chairs. So you don't have on-site consumption. These are products that go. And so when we get to tables and chairs, that's where we put in the unless approved as a part of a land use application. In compliance with this, there's no tables and chairs. That I think we acknowledge if you're going to start consuming on site, then I think trash is elevated in terms of the need to assess that. But if it's trashy, I don't need a business license to go out there and enforce. This is a disrepair if we have debris. So
I think we should.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we don't need to change the rules to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Wanted to clarify, and I've now forgotten exactly how you phrased it, but this is, instead of saying you have to move every 6 months, this isn't changing it to you have to move every 12 months. This is, you can stay in the same place and you will get an annual permit. And if you want to move, you obviously can, but like you don't have to, correct?
Correct. So the license can be renewed, it's an annual license for these, and it can be renewed annually.
Okay.
So I think there's a little clarification in the class 2 license definition, which is all our food carts are class 2. No one has chosen to hook up. Just a little bit of punctuation changing to ensure that we've addressed that you can have this for a year. There's one other ordinance that talked about the heroic nature of the city. It's actually the historic nature. And that was a recital, although a valiant effort. I'm not overplaying this as heroic, but historic was actually the citation from the code that we were looking for. So
thank you, Justin. I did call you out on that, so thank you. But yes, what he was saying about the class 2 thing, I found it confusing to say, okay, you can have, paraphrase, but you can have the permit for 30 consecutive days, not to exceed 365 consecutive days, which may be renewed annually. And like, that was a weird You can have a 30-day permit multiple times to be renewed annually. So we kind of, I did talk to Dustin ahead of time and did a little wordsmithing that I'm gonna run by you all of like, we're on page 4, a license to a class 2 transient merchant is issued for a period of 30 to 366 counting for leap year consecutive days, which may be renewed annually. So they can get one permit for a certain amount of time. That could potentially be the whole year. They could renew it.
Any objection?
We could fix that in the Scribner's issue.
Great. And then just something else that I did talk to you about, but I kind of want everyone else to hear. So our transient merchant thing doesn't say anything about like, you don't have to move anymore. That's the whole point of this, but other places have the, like, you must still be mobile. Can you talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, for food trucks, food carts, or mobile food vendors, the vehicle has to remain mobile. And that's one of the hallmarks of our health code officials and their authority to make sure that we have some mobility. This is not just it must remain transient in nature. Although it may not move, it has to be readily available to move. So either a trailer, truck, it has to be mobile. So you can see our food trucks out there, they're trailers, they're trucks, they are mobile vehicles. It's not expressly listed in here that your food truck must be mobile, but I think that is in the rule set that we have. Not just our license, but it's the health department requires that as well. So this license actually handles seasonal as well. So it's not just applying to food carts. Our 30 days is for holiday tree sales, for pumpkins, for produce. So those are not necessarily food trucks, but they are transient merchants. So it's kind of rolled into them. This is a Swiss Army ordinance. We didn't do a food truck ordinance. We think it handles everyone. So.
Thank you, Dustin.
Right.
No questions. With the transient thing, are carts that move in for festivals and stuff for a weekend, is that under the festival permit then probably?
Right, and then the health department still does the application there. We wouldn't be necessarily doing transient. We have seasonal and we have special. It'd be more of a special event.
And we're just not steering them to that permitting process.
They go to a different line.
And then my other question is Article 2, paragraph 3, which didn't change, uses the term waterfront, and I think it was written when the whole waterfront was owned by the port, and now that's not true. And I'm curious to whether that historic change over time affects. I mean, it's sort of a get out of jail free card for however we define the waterfront. Is that true? Again.
Yeah, the intent was to address, the downwinder and the number of carts that are there seasonally, and transient merchants, not even food related, but your windsurfing, your big winds, school, those non-food features. Yeah, that is, since we have now, it may be worth separating the port from private property in that.
Does it simply change waterfront to port properties, or in the scheme of, can we do an edit that we vote on in 5 minutes?
We can do an edit in that. I want to make sure that I would like to look at that, because not all properties are they port owned, port leased, option to lease, future. I mean, I would like to. It hasn't presented itself as an issue now. We've handled the private property owners and the carts as private property. They've never sought a waterfront exempt to claim that they are somehow immune from this. They've just simply handled it as private property.
So what do we do? We do that have to come back, or can we? Is it enough? Is it a Scribner thing, or is it beyond that?
We could differentiate in that section, private property from port owned.
Maybe we just say that, then the wording can be
fiddled with a little bit. People comfortable with that? Great, that's all I have. Okay, so I didn't see a draft motion. Oh, excuse me, thank you. God, Zoom. Hey, there's this thing, it's called Zoom. Gladys, do you have anything for us? Okay. I don't see a suggested motion, but we are moving this forward. Abigail, where are we?
So I think there was a staff motion, but it's under staff recommendations.
Staff recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's a. Thank you, Councilor Thunder. So, do we have anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on this matter? Next. Hearing none, council questions, we did that already. Now I'm going to close the testimony portion of the hearing and open council deliberations. I'm not quite in order here. Now I'm looking for a motion to place. So the reading here is I'm looking for a motion to place the ordinance on tonight's agenda for first reading. And the staff recommendation is, as was pointed out on page 1. So I would entertain the motion.
And we would do the one as amended in the alternatives?
Have we made amendments to it?
I think I have the waterfront differentiation and historic from heroic.
Well, and the 30.
Oh,
to
in the
360.
punctuation of 30 to 366.
Great.
Leap year included.
Okay, then I will move to hear ordinance 2073 with the 3 different amendments noted by Dustin on tonight's regular agenda for the first time.
Excellent. You have a second?
I second.
Second by Councilor Rivera. Any further discussion? All in favor of moving this to the regular agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion moves. Okay. I think I did my whole script. Did I do my whole script? You're great. Great. So now we're opening the work session at 8:06. Agenda additions or corrections, Abigail, other than, oh no, that's still in the work session. That thing's on the regular agenda. Agenda additions or corrections?
No changes.
No changes. Great. Discussion items. Councilor Paulson has a really interesting thing. I'm excited about this. Take it away, Grant.
No pressure. Thanks. So we have our work session and our goals and everything that we have for the next year, 2 years in our packet included. There is, as we all noticed, there's a lot going on, a lot around town with various agencies, county, port, what have you. My thinking is it would make sense for us, the council as a group, to get together and discuss some of these longer term initiatives or goals that we have and prioritize them and figure out what we're doing longer than 2 years out. Figure out what we're going to do regarding bonding, which things we're going to prioritize, what our strategy is past these next 2 years. Prioritize what we're going to do after that. And it would be helpful to come up with some of that strategy in talking with our agency partners as well. In a nutshell, that was my thought.
What do you think, people?
Just clarifying, would it be, I mean, with goal setting, it's sort of here's a list of things that we're actually asking staff to do. So this is sort of setting the on deck circle a little bit. Is that?
Yeah. A thought about that was we are giving staff a list to knock out. There's going to be things on our mind to come after that list. We're going to knock out some of those things during the year. Things that we're not necessarily telling staff to do now, but ideas that we as a council should be discussing or figuring out long-term after these items are off our list. None of these discussions should take up any staff time. They should be issues that we discuss as a council.
Yeah, I think I'm confused about what you, I mean, is this different goals than and I'm going to butcher what they were called, but like the 6 big goals in the work plan of, a diverse and accessible housing inventory. Are you talking more like, okay, let's fill in the work plan for 4 years from now, or like SMART goals, or something? What am I?
some of that, but if we're gonna meet our goals, what are we going to bond for, in which order? When are we even going to bond? Because that process is a longer process usually than our regular goal setting timelines are. We're kind of here to think about consequences 5, 10, 25 years down the road. The urban renewal area, for example, is a 25-year plan. So I think we should be talking about these sorts of concepts or ideas in relation to those sorts of timelines.
Yeah, no, I think talking is always good. You know, and discussions are always good, but we do have documents to kind of like lay out some long-term visions for the city.
Sure, but how do we choose? Should we not be regularly having this discussion on which ones we're going to pursue?
I mean, we have a lot of things, even some of the stuff that we discussed tonight have like, 10 to 25 to, year timelines. So with set things that, are prioritized. So I don't think that we're necessarily lacking some of it that I think you're talking about. But, defining specific goals and projects. I think maybe you could just help me better understand. If you're trying to get us to think about like consequences of our planning actions now for the future.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, I guess to some extent, that we have thought about those things. That's my impression in the context of stuff like the comprehensive plan, so on and so forth. All this stuff actually has to be kind of like aligned with those concepts. So, to some extent, I think we have done that and we should do it. But other than that, kind of like crystal balling stuff, 20 years in the future is tough.
I'm wondering if there's any specific examples of things, initiatives that you've seen that the sort of greater picture has been overlooked that made you think of this. Like, is there anything specific? Is this more just general? Because the way I'm interpreting it, at least, is, we met on December 3rd, came up with the work plan, made it a 2-year plan. Part of that is because it's concurrent with, how all of us are elected, et cetera. And we also, as Tim mentioned, we have things like the housing needs analysis, the transportation system plan, some of these things, these documents draw upon on each one of these planning sessions to continue what we interpret as, long-term goals and goals. So I'm just wondering if there's something specific that you're thinking of that fell short in that framework.
I never think it's necessarily a waste of time to discuss that framework and everything associated with it. Any other additional ideas, any other frameworks, structures, ways we can improve those concepts, alternates, ways we can meet future obligations, fund future liabilities, any of those things that might potentially come up, especially associated with the things that we've already decided upon. And I am keenly aware that life changes all the time. My thought was that we should have those kinds of discussions more often than once a year. We should be evaluating all of the plethora of ideas available to us more regularly as a group. In not necessarily just a normal council saying, but just casually us getting together as a council. That does not require anyone else's time or effort or anything like that. To discuss our transportation plans, to discuss zoning, to discuss all of the ideas that we have to address and come up through our work. That if the council is not interested in that, That's how that is. That was what I was trying to get at with proposing that proposal.
Sorry, yeah, I think I'm still not really clear on what you want to do. You know, I obviously, yes, talking about things is always good. I had a hard time thinking how we would have a productive conversation about the TSP or like a specific project that doesn't involve Abigail or Dustin or whatever appropriate staff people. And presumably some preparation, because I certainly haven't memorized the TSP or any of these other like I you know, like we can all talk, but like can we talk in a useful manner without input? I mean, I guess I'm not really, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but.
Is it that you want us to talk about the
Go ahead,
work plan
Gladys.
more often? Like, for example, we talked about in December, we meet again in June or July, and then we talk again in December? Is that what you're looking for?
Not necessarily any set time frame. If it's twice a year, great. But not a particular set time in mind, not specifically.
Mark.
So I love having blue sky discussions, and the way council meetings work, we don't really have a space for that, or we haven't built it. And might be what you're thinking about, like, okay, well, you know, we have this heights plan, but what do we each really have? You know, what's the picture in our heads about what that's going to look like in 15 years or 20 years? I think for the grant one, it's actually on the list, and there's going to be a set of milestones that we're going to talk about. But having the space to have a clean sheet of paper to say, wow, there's 15 different things that could go in that, but how do we narrow it down? Am I close?
Something along those lines. Yeah, we have our broad framework of what we're up to. We know generally which direction we're going. From there, there's a broad plethora of possibilities, directions that this could go in. I think it would be helpful for us to make sure that we map those out to some extent and know which direction we're going in.
Are you talking about specific bonds? Like, for example, if we were to pass a housing bond, that a small group of us would get together, that we would get together and figure out what bonds do we pass? Or are you looking for this bond will require us to talk to state, maybe legislative folks, which one of us is going to go out there to ensure that there's support for additional legislative funding or specific bonds?
Sure. Earlier, we've discussed the idea or concept of bonding strategies or figuring out which things to bond for. That discussion or this discussion should help us figure out, I would think, which things we want to bond for, what ranks highly on our list, and what kind of stuff we're going to choose to do in terms of an actual bond strategy. We only have a certain amount of space that we could bond for and become indebted for based on our fiscal performance and state metrics. So knowing how much that is and what we can actually do within the realm of possibility would be helpful for us in making our decisions, I believe.
So, that is, I thought that was kind of the project we have in the work plan, is to discuss potential options and what criteria would create sidelines, and if we wanted to go forward, and if so, on what, for a bond. Like, is this different than that?
Do we have that discussion here? Or do we have where we can just openly discuss everything that's in the world of possibility that we could possibly chase after and actually whittle some of that stuff down and have more focused conversations when we're here?
I mean, we have to have it in a public meeting, right?
Yes.
I guess, what do you mean by not here?
I mean, we have guests that come in that discuss their issues, business for the audience, regular work, presentations, other things that require other people's time.
So you would, just like a separate work session to discuss bond ideas would,
Or whatever we would desire to discuss. Right.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, talking's good. I think with everything with every problem that we're faced with, I think that personally, I try to like look down the road and, see where it's leading us. And that's part of incorporate that into kind of the decision making process. But it's not a group discussion.
Yeah, we could continue to do that individually or over coffee or whatever.
But it's really difficult because, the kind of like the political cycle, the election cycle. It's like you have people that are elected for 2 years at a time, 4 years at a time. Some, there's this overlapping thing where there's turnover on the council. So it's really kind of hard to vision, very far in the future, other than, kind of like the continuance of our planning documents and our planning process. Like in the TSP and the housing needs analysis and the comprehensive plan.
Sure, I understand that after so much time, seats will change, people come and go.
Right.
I've been here for a month.
Yep.
That happens. And
Right.
people will vote as they vote.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I would, I'm certainly open to talking, but we just need to make sure that it's like a productive conversation that actually leads somewhere. And, having been involved in these types of discussions in other venues, it's a very difficult thing to facilitate. So it would have to be a very, you'd actually have to have like specific goals that you would want to achieve, as part of that discussion. Otherwise, we're just sitting around talking to one another, which is great. We could do it over beers,
But we really can't, right? I mean, that's the whole non-published meeting kind of thing. And I mean, I agree with Grant that it would be nice. I mean, if we had half an hour every 2 months or something where we just said, okay, Tim, we're just gonna riff on one thing. So Tim is gonna pick low impact development that we should get to eventually kind of thing. And we just sort of go around and we say, this is, I've never thought of that, or we could dig into it. It's the level of a discussion that we don't do very much. I mean, we get to stuff eventually, but giving just a little bit of oxygen to open-ended, we're not making a decision. We're just sort of seeing it feels like a decent investment in time to me.
So the agenda item would read something like long-term visioning, and we would do it periodically. We would allocate some time. I mean, beers, no, because, public meeting, but it would be allocating some time at these meetings or getting people to commit to another weeknight, like that's something else we could discuss. As long as we invite the public and tell them we're doing it, we can do a lot of things.
I suppose the forum to introduce those concepts would be council call, right? So if you had an idea that necessitated this type of additional discussion, that's saying, I don't want to just do this within a minute, and have further discussion upon it, but it's not necessarily on the upcoming agenda. I mean, there will be impact to staff, I think, no matter what we do, right? So I think the proper thing also in the spirit of that is to, speak with staff. This is the idea I want to, but I think this will require further discussion, and have that context brought up. Council call, I think that's a good way to maybe think of it, where we could
I agree
discuss
with
if it requires.
I agree with the council call. I mean, I can remember instances where somebody says, hey, I had this idea. Are you guys interested in talking more about that? And we get a feel right in that moment. Other counselors like, Sure, let's put that on the agenda for a future meeting and that you kind of it hatches in the council call. And then does or doesn't have enough interest from folks to put it on the agenda. That's kind of a process. That's kind of a path forward that I've seen. And also, I think it's important for us to be forthright in advocating, like, you know, if we just painted the streets pink, that would be just like the thing. That's really like the missing je ne sais quoi. I guess, you guys, shall we put that?
Now
on the
that you've
agenda?
said
Like,
that.
yeah, no, we're not gonna do that. Like, okay, I floated the idea, you know, the Air Force shot down the balloon. Like, sometimes that happens. So being clear about what our interests are, and at some point we have to be clear and specific.
Yeah, and to some extent, I mean, that should happen at the annual work planning
Yes,
as well. You know.
yes.
Well, and every year we've done this. It's like either us as counselors, or I think often the city manager keeps the running list of things that have bubbled up in council call or in other discussions of like, okay, it's not on the work plan this year. We're not doing it. We don't have staff time for it, but I will bring it back around to say, well, you expressed interest in, you know, looking at SDCs. We've talked about it for 5 years. Like, do we actually want to do it? And so I think that is an avenue we've certainly used in the past, and it seems very reasonable to continue to use.
I was just gonna say that the goal of the annual thing is to have some deepish discussions, but it just doesn't give us time to do sort of like, you know, what about, you know, the pink road thing again, you know? So we pre-sort the annual meeting to the stuff that's likely to be on the plan, in my opinion, and having sometimes I'm hip to someone brings it up, maybe it's a quarterly, hey, it's your turn to come up with an idea for a blue sky half hour. But doing it in council call for the next meeting kind of thing, that feels okay to me.
I want the council call to feel like an entry point for you guys. I want you to feel like the agenda is open to you. Again, you know, 4 votes makes a yes. So it does, I'm not saying anybody else is going to love it, but you get to talk about it.
You know, one item that always comes to mind when we are talking about these work plans or, you know, our goals for the year is what sort of grant funding is available out there that would apply to that. I welcome those conversations because there are grants available that could support some of the work that we're trying to initiate or really sustain long term. Yeah, I agree with everyone around. Council call is really where we bring these items up. But just a topic that I consistently think of are grants, what grants are available, what grants are staff's working on. Recognize that we have a grant writer through MCED, how much of this individual's time is dedicated to writing grants specific to our work plan that we want to achieve.
Thanks.
All right. Anything else on this topic? Grant, did you feel that you got the hearing that you wanted? Yep. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. At this time, we will adjourn the work session and move right into the regular council meeting. Agenda additions or corrections, Abigail?
No changes.
Great. Consent agenda, we have OLCC for Lake Tahoe. We have final design phase invoice for the intersection. Would entertain a motion.
As always, I'm annoyed by ODOT, but I move to approve the consent agenda.
Let the record show that she's annoyed and she moved. Do we have a second?
I second, and I too am annoyed.
Second by Gladys, and yes or no annoyed?
Yes, annoyed.
Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. All right, next, Big River Community Land Trust transfer of deed. Done. Draft. This is another, Dustin, where are you? Draft Hood River City conic work plan. The autocorrect gremlin strikes again. Council work plan.
Council, council, you're iconic, heroic and historic and iconic. Thank you all for letting me bring this topic back to you. At our last meeting, You saw just a brief list of projects that I had recommended to you, generally heard agreement on a 2-year plan, but a desire to see, the draft and give more detailed feedback. So that is why I'm here. I got my copy, you've got your copies. Looking for kind of high level things. If you have typos, I would love to get those comments, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on typos and Scrivener errors here. We are proofreading them as well. And my huge thanks to Roundtree Roofs, who has gotten us a couple of different versions of this and got it in your packet this week. So thank you, Roundtree.
Anybody want to kick it off?
Thank you. Couple things. One, I asked a lot of questions of Abigail earlier today, and thank you for your time. But I think there were really 2 things out of that I wanted to bring to you guys. The one of them being page 43 of the packet, page 18 of the work plan, the FEMA project, where it says, discuss how FEMA can support Hood River's effort to outreach to the public. And my understanding is that it is FEMA's project to outreach to the public, and we are supporting them. And I really don't want to take ownership of a project that I think will be very unpopular.
That is an excellent catch, Counselor.
So
I appreciate that. And I will note that FEMA will be at your next meeting with a presentation. We'll get more detail from them at that time. But that is well noted.
Thank you. So assuming everyone else is cool with that, that's a edit. And then page 44 of the packet, the government relations activities for 2023 is monitor meetings and then invite people to come to our meetings, which I think is great. But I'm wondering if council would also like to select counselors to attend other meetings and present to other people. So it doesn't feel like we're calling people in to present to the king and not going to them. So thoughts?
Yeah, we have people who are, our rep at a given committee. Still very similar to that, where we would be like, okay, you're gonna be the person who goes and reaches out to some other entity. That makes sense.
I like the having a rotation through these things is a smart idea. Just like, we're doing Radio Tierra rotation. I think that we should all, in addition to Megan, go to county meetings once in a while. They come to ours. So in other similar things is like we could gin up a rotation kind of thing and see if we can't get people to go. So I think it's good for the organization.
I mean, I guess for tonight, it's like, do you want to add figure out that?
Could we squeeze that into number 2, like monitor agendas, and when appropriate, or maybe something should be something more formal.
Very open to discussion. Conveniently, we have a number 1 missing, so we could say number 1 is assign people.
Thank you for that typo as well. Yeah.
But I'm open to it. I mean, something, I don't know how we want to phrase it or how important it is to get that quite right, but it just seems like part of the activity for the year.
So help me talk through, maybe clearly county. Like, I don't think any of us is signing up to go to Salem except for once a year when you guys did. Like, who else? Like, we're not going to Watershed. We're like.
I mean, I think our primary ones are probably county park sport.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could, part of this is maybe we talk about if there's other ones people think are valuable, but the agencies we wanted to build better relations with, I think are.
Well, what about ODOT? I mean, that's something that Eric used to attend, and I don't know if there's any sort of local rep that, whether that's the county or the city that goes to those meetings.
Grant volunteered to be the new Eric on that.
Right, this is the example of where we do have assigned committee assignments, and Grant is the new Eric on that one. And I'm
sorry.
Like his name, and Grant and I'm the primary on the bridge, and Grant's the alternate. I mean, we did assign those out. This would be sort of expanding this idea. And Mark's on McKed. I mean, we did that last time.
I guess for tonight, Abigail, could you add something to this that says we will discuss and determine that further?
Yep, that sounds great. Or for number 2, we could just simply, where it says monitor agendas and meetings, it could just be attend meetings of local governments. And then you can figure out who those local governments are
Yeah, that's-
based on, what treats they have or what's on their agenda or other options.
Offer, Brad, thank you.
So there's only one word to be added, which is the word attend.
Yep. Instead. Or it might be that you need to bring treats to them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That is it. Thank you all.
Who's next? Doug.
I have a quick one. Page 54. So the formalized parklet food cart rules. I think I heard from Dustin earlier. And I think it's my understanding that the sort of parklets don't have anything to do with the ordinance necessarily, because it doesn't require code change. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't say add a third bullet point is, or because I'm thinking it's update city procedures and forms to comply with the updated ordinance.
Mhm.
Right? And since the updated ordinance has nothing to do with parklets
Gotcha.
and everything to do with food carts,
Yeah.
can we not provide clarification there? Because Dustin said we could work on that program
Mhm.
independent of the ordinance. I think it's still related and
Yeah.
so that might be a little nitpicky, but
Yep, that makes sense to me. Maybe number 2 can be clarified specifically for food carts, and then we'll add a number 3 that's specific to parklets.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. And then we have more things to check off and claim that we did. So thank you for that.
No change in that. Anything else, Doug?
No, thank you.
Others? Great.
I wish not to be the new Eric.
You enjoy it. My mistake, I did that, sorry. Doesn't want to be here, doesn't want to be here.
He doesn't want to be Grant.
Okay. Where is that? So what we're doing is providing staff with feedback on this sort of.
If you are good with what we have, do you have a suggested motion? If you want to see another copy before you're comfortable adopting it, I can be on the agenda for the next meeting as well.
My opinion is the amount of changes we made is small and we could approve it. In the scope of the changes we suggested, I think we could move ahead.
There's a suggested motion on the.
I
in the
move to
packet.
approve and adopt the 2023-2024 City of Hood River City Council Work Plan with the mentioned changes.
So moved, anybody?
I will second.
Second.
Thank you, Grant.
Second by Saunders. Clarification of naming.
This page is wrong.
I cut that out and I put that on my wall. I like that show.
I did have one comment to make. And I know that we chatted about this at our work session that took place in December. I did miss the last meeting that we had, so it could have been that it was discussed at that time. It would be nice to have some sort of cost estimates associated to each one of these work goals. Like, how much is that going to cost us? Is there existing funds? And then is there sort of like ongoing grants or additional funding that we could apply for that could support some of these goals?
I see Abigail scribbling. That,
Yep.
you have any
I
feedback on
think
it?
for most of them, we can do. Some of them are a little bit squishy. I don't know how much it's going to cost for you to make cookies to take to the county. That one, I don't know that has any cost estimates or other pieces, but we can certainly, identify where some of the funding's coming from and what the fiscal impact might be.
And I want to respect sort of like the Elaine Howard part of the world, like coming up with cost estimates is no joke. Like, don't be like taking tons of time with that. A range or a high, something like that. With modest effort.
Yeah. We can give it a good try and then maybe we'll have feedback based on that. But I personally like that idea, because if this really informs the budget, that gives you a sense of really what you might expect coming, in future requests.
And I think that gets back to Councillor Polson's point, right? How much of this can we actually forecast? How much do we designate to a grant writer versus what we save for the time that we meet to talk about the budget specifically?
Great.
Great.
I'll take that back.
So we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There goes aye, motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Abigail. And thanks to page works. It's great to get it pulled together in a graphically coherent way.
I did just love our little pictures in it too. Thank you.
Grant's looking like a model.
I
Photoshop.
It was not my intent with the strengths, like I had not planned to use that, but then when Ron and I talked about it, that was really perfect. And I already heard from one staff member who's like, I feel like I learned more about my counselors from that, so. That's.
Speech.
So that already, that was already useful.
Okay, moving on. City Recorder Jen, can we read the ordinance?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to entertain a motion for the first reading of ordinance 2073 by title only to include the 3 amendments.
So moved.
By Megan,
Second.
second by Grant. Is this a roll call vote, Jen?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Counselor Polson,
Aye.
Counselor Rivera,
Aye.
Counselor Stepina,
Aye.
Counselor Saunders,
Yes.
Counselor Coonihan.
Aye.
Counselor Zanmiller,
Yes.
Your Honor. Ordinance 2073, an ordinance amending Title 5, Business Taxes, License and Regulations, Charter 5.07, Transient Merchant, and Special Events, Section 5.07.030, Definitions, and 5.07.050, License Application Standards and Limitations of the Hood River Municipal Code to allow mobile food vendors.
Thank you. Jen, just one detail. On the page that I'm looking at right here, it says 2037, so the numbers are flipped. You read it, I believe, correctly, but
20.
the agenda says 2037. So just get that cleaned up for no
Yep.
confusion. And
It is 2073.
great, okay. Great. So it's passed. Do I have to say anything? It's passed its first reading. We'll have the second reading next time. There's no pronouncement. Right.
Correct.
Mayor call. I asked staff to make a note of this. You guys got the email maybe 10 days ago that DLCD is asking for an advisory committee. Now, you think we hate ODOT? I mean, the frustration of trying to accomplish the land use we wish to accomplish is huge because the state gets involved, and we have, referred it to and then back, and it's very challenging. So the idea of an advisory committee for the department is very exciting to me. I'm not really looking to drive to Salem, but this is an important issue for our city. So I don't know exactly how to move forward, but the idea of getting to have a voice is appealing to me. Megan.
I apologize. I didn't read that email, but do we know, do you have to go to Salem? Is it virtual? How often are the meetings? What's the time commitment?
I also don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think it's a hybrid meeting.
Okay.
And I suspect this is like, you self-nominate and then they choose 2 and it may be moot, but
Well, I may be interested with a little more info.
great. So I heard Megan volunteering to go back and read that email and let us know whether she might be able to do it. Wonderful. Thank you. Mayor call. I've attended one of the bridge committees. Grant has since I have, so I'd love to hear his report. Trying to think. Oh, I'm going to start pie with the mayor again. So keep your ears out for when
March
you can.
14th. Good.
That would be very good. Yes, 3.14. That would be perfect day. Anyway, so keep your ears open for the return of Pie with the Mayor. Council call, Doug.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on necessarily speaking to parklets so much today, but yeah, I think the conversation or the testimony I heard earlier has got me thinking a little bit more about parklets and potential for the city. I have seen what's going on in Walla Walla and other communities, the sort of European side of me and walkable, speaks to that. So I just hope that we continue that conversation. I know that 64 has got a specific sort of issue I'm not sure how that could be ironed out, but that sounded, impactful, but yeah, just the idea of what that does to the city in terms of walkability and how the city appears. And, I think in terms of the way that I choose where to go in now, it has a lot to do with whether it has outdoor seating or not. And I think a lot of our restaurants in the downtown district and, places that people congregate were built in a time where that wasn't so important. So I think it's good. It's a good thing for us to keep in mind going forward. And that's why I suggested at least the clarification in the work plan that it's not necessarily over for that piece of it. Nothing else for me. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess what I would mention is that I am continuing to be involved with the Energy Committee. And I've talked to Abigail and Haley, Ella, and I have met with some folks there. And I'm interested in getting them to come before council to discuss, how we could potentially partner to take advantage of some of the funding that's available right now. So
I'm going to attempt to model my idea here, which is, would folks like us to invite the Energy Council to come present to council? Is there interest in that?
Yes.
Or not? I got
Yes.
nods, so we'll get that on the agenda.
thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Megan.
Yes, Grant and I went to Salem 2 weeks ago. Yeah. For the League of Oregon Cities City Day at the Capitol. And, got to hear a bunch of presentations and then had, very short periods of time with Rep. Helfrich and Senator Bonham. But they were both happy to host us. And we talked about a lot of the things that we had discussed bringing to them. And I guess heads up potentially to staff if we did invite them to, if they ever wanted to come to a future council meeting and introduce themselves or take a tour of the city. We said we'd love to have them. And so I'm hoping they'll take us up on that in the future. But yeah, I think it was just building some relationships, getting some FaceTime. Grant, anything to add?
We ended up getting about an hour, almost an hour with Bonham. We got extra time. So yeah, a lot of it was just going to the conference, then meeting with those two after. So hopefully we can bring some ideas. The both parties were keen on investing on infrastructure and related to more holistic infrastructure projects, not necessarily one project or another, but more holistic infrastructure approaches. Yeah, that's what I heard from everybody down there.
You feel anything?
Yeah.
Brandon, anything else for you?
Over the last, yeah. There was League of Oregon Cities Day. We talked about that. We had the bi-state working group on the bridge meeting a week ago. Feels like forever ago. Yeah. Mayor, they would like just to be on the same page regarding press language, communications with the general public, just to be speaking with one voice. They discussed a bit of potential increases in tolling and how that could be modeled or split off or various levels thereof to raise an amount of seed money in order to go out and get some grants and some other financing ahead of their bigger chunks of financing. So they're going to find some additional sensitivities on that as a proposal. Nothing was decided, but they directed staff for additional information.
That would be that commission asking the port to raise their rates and set aside
And
the increment for the new bridge.
and splitting it in some form or fashion, yes.
I want to understand this, and I'm sorry we didn't talk since you went. I think that our success in getting outside funding is going to be increased. The chance of success will be increased if we're setting aside sooner than later. How much do you think that message was heard at that meeting?
I'm not sure. Not sure if it.
I mean, it's a very odd situation where the port is 100% in charge of the tolls that the port charges. But soon the bridge is gonna be owned by somebody else, and then somebody else is gonna have to tear down the old bridge. It's like there's this negative savings bond that spins off money for the port, but has a huge disposal cost. It's like a negative savings account. Weird financial instrument that would be. So I realize I'm quite concerned about that, and I'm not exactly sure how the BSWG interfaces with the port on that, but I'll be at the meeting next week and I'll know more.
Going to the first time going to that group, I had the same impression and concerns. So hopefully that can be addressed and ironed out in the future.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's exactly the same as I gathered. Immediately after that one was the ODOT meeting where new Eric was there.
Oh man, it's never gonna go away.
No, it's not. Never ever going away. Will forever be new Eric. Speaking of other counselors interested in funding and other opportunities, ODOT has a carbon reduction program that they're rolling out, and they're interested in hosting a number of open houses and various things. One's February 28th, another one's March 15th. And they have deadlines coming up soon. I don't have the exact date. They didn't give me the exact date on that. For requests or grants for localities for a number of different carbon reduction programs and processes. It could be active transport. It could be a ton of options. And their requirements, well, we basically get 10-to-1 leveraging on our funds. If we provide 10% of it, that's all they're asking for through this program. So they would cover the other 90%. That's what was discussed. So that's a pretty good opportunity. I have the full PowerPoint and the contact should we choose to go after that here pretty soon. Another thing that was brought up was Oregon's EV fast charging plans to build a giant network across Oregon. Right now they're looking at phase 2, I believe, or plans for that. Finding locations that they could install basically gas stations for EV vehicles. So you pull up and just plug in your vehicle and you're on your way. So right now they're working on finding partners for some more of that network throughout the state. What else? That's it from those two groups.
About that, those are like programs that they announced. Also, that group I think of as sort of the way we apply for the funding for the stuff we want, which is sort of the flip side of that. Let us know how we can be supportive of you being sort of our emissary for here's Hood River's list of priority items, you know, this stoplight and this traffic light, this exit, you know, that's funding for stuff that is way too expensive for us otherwise. So it's important that we're effectively telling them about that.
Yeah, I-84 is year 2, which is what they're trying to focus on now. But that's going to come right through our area. There's a few requirements to do it. They're looking at both public and mainly private partnerships right now that just to find the land and then put something on it. And then they have an open house soon, next week, on the 21st in Portland. That conveniently I'll be in Portland, so I might be able to stop by that. Yeah, it's the same day that I'll be back in Salem. So I'll be back in Salem on Tuesday morning, and then maybe I will be at that in Portland at 5:45 in the evening. That's for this particular open house. Yeah. There's other reasons why I go to Portland, either for work or my wife. We have a condo there because she works in Portland. So yeah, and it made more sense to buy a small condo than rent a place.
Sounds like a fun day.
Yeah, it's a fun day.
Salem and Portland.
Yeah. Again.
Gladys, you mentioned a grant writer at McKed. What's the process through which we say, hey, grant writer, there's a grant that we might want to apply for? Like, is that a council action or does that flow through staff or? McKed board member or? you know?
That would be great for us to define because I think we haven't. I don't know who the grant writer is. Yeah, and what they work on for the city.
I mean, knowing what we want, I mean, is it writing a grant for the 10% of the 20 new plug-in things we want to put on State Street? I mean,
I was assuming safe routes to school would be the list we'd.
Safe Routes is a great one, yeah. It's low carbon.
Well, it's like getting kids out of cars seems.
So as soon as, we can, McKed's great to talk to, as soon as we have an ask, right? I guess I could do fact finding, just find out from Jessica how does it work?
And the way you said that helped clarify for me, like, do we have an ask or do we identify a pot? And it's like, oh, let's go after it. And those are sort of two different things. Is it prompted by the availability or prompted by our need? And maybe the answer is sometimes one of each.
In the infrastructure legislation in Oregon specifically, small urban and rural areas, there's $26.8 million available.
It's binders on the shelf, right? If we have safe routes, can we?
Yeah, and that is 1/3 of the total available funding in the entire state is for small urban and rural areas.
So Abigail, is that a box you're looking to check? I mean, is there, oh gosh, if we got this ODOT grant for safe routes, like would that push one of our priorities along?
Yep, that would be great. Staff recently met with McKed, with Jessica and staff member, I think named Kristen, to review kind of what they can provide for grants. We weren't aware of this one, so we'll definitely take that, review it, and if we've got something eligible, ask McKed for their help.
I keep interrupting you, Grant, I'm sorry.
I think that's everything on my list.
Thanks
Thanks.
for being out there repping for us. A lot of work.
Yeah, good work. I was just gonna say, all I have is the field goal with 8 seconds left yesterday.
Thanks for that. My daughter's just saying, Dad, did you hear there's a Rihanna concert coming up on Sunday? I thought that was a pretty.
I don't have anything else.
All right. There was a lot going on tonight. I think that brings us to the end. Gladys, I'm sorry, I'm no good at Zoom, Gladys. You got to like self-advocate. Go ahead.
Or had your back.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. Ladies supporting each other. Yeah, I do have a couple updates. So one of our goals for this coming year for our council work plan is to support people experiencing houselessness. I do have the privilege to serve on the MCAC board, and recently MCAC has closed on a purchase of a Oregon motor motel in the Dalles. That was made possible by a grant through the Oregon Community Foundation through its project Turnkey 2.0. That hotel is going to be called the Annex, and it's going to be pretty close to the Navigation Center or the Gloria Center that's right down the street. This will be a converted to transitional shelter and housing that's going to provide approximately 100 beds to Hood River, Wasco, and Sherman counties. A portion of the beds will be utilized for transitional family shelter / housing, which is a resource gap here in the area. MCAC is also partnering with multiple agencies to ensure that folks have the additional resources that they need in order to stay housed. And some of those partners are, let me pick up the flyer so I don't leave anybody out. Mid-Columbia Center for Living, the Oregon Human Development Corporation, the Next Door, Nichiwana Housing, Mid-Columbia Medical Center, Providence Hood River Memorial Hospital, One Community Health, Columbia Gorge Health Council, and the Bridges to Health program. In addition to that additional funding, or to that hotel, they've also, MCAC has received $969,000 or so. With that, Washington Gorge Action Programs also received a little over $1 million for a total of $2 million that is going to go into rapid rehousing and other investments. So Good job, McCack, and more good news for those that are experiencing houselessness in our communities.
Wow, super Gladys. What exciting news. Thanks for being our rep out there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
There is a groundbreaking ceremony that is going to take place on Friday, February 24th for the Navigation Center. If you're interested, then please let me know and I'll make sure that Kenny sends you an invite so that you can RSVP. This is just the groundbreaking ceremony. The Navigation Center hasn't been built quite yet. So if you're interested in attending, please let me know and I'll make sure you get a really pretty invite.
I am. Send it to me, please, Gladys. Thank you.
Will do.
Yeah, me too.
And Tim,
Do.
Paul and Tim. Anything else, Counselor?
No, Mayor. Ooh, pastry. So you said you were gonna have pie. Does that also include postres con el alcalde?
Depende donde está.
Ah, okay.
Good, we'll talk. Thank you. Anything else? I'm going to adjourn at 8:59.